Hey guys, today I will present you the example of Leakfinder analysis. Leakfinder is a tool that's provided for SmartSpin members, and basically after you export the report with your statistics and win rates and then upload it to our tool on SmartSpin site, you can simply make a quick leak finding of your game and get some instant recommendations when it comes to videos, materials, or basically areas that it's worth for you to improve. So let's go with an example. This is analysis of a recent Leakfinder that was provided by one of our members. I blurred his nickname for obvious reasons. And yeah, let's see what's going on. Let's see what we can find in his Leakfinder. There are monthly Leakfinders, Leakfinder coachings during which I go through these Leakfinders. And even if someone is not present, like in the case of this guy, I'll record the video with my thoughts, with some correlations, because not everything is so obvious. Lots of statistics obviously affect each other. So here I am for you to give you some insights. So let's see what's going on. Here we have the Leakfinder that has been uploaded with 3 reports overall and split it versus regs and fish. Generally, if you play up to $10 stakes, it's okay to just do the overall Leakfinder, because this will allow us to see overall results when it comes to GPV per game. However, if you play higher stakes and the reg ratio starts to differ, the overall is not it's just not enough. So that's why for higher stakes, if you make a reg list in your PT4, you can split the reports and then see results. Depends the opponent you're playing against, and that's way more way better way of checking your results, because what defines the results the most is how often you play against reg and fish. As you can see in that case, this player heads up achieves minus 0.1 chip per hand versus regs. So on average, reg versus reg runs somewhere around 0, while versus fish, the average result per hand heads up. I mean, okay, it's not the average per hand, but heads up small blind and heads up big blind sums up to 7.8, right? So so basically the round, right? And so on average 4 chips per hand heads up. So obviously we want to play as many hands as possible versus fish, but yeah, here we want to see in which areas we have room for improvement against reg and against fish. So this is where we'll start. And here, based on the experience, based on data analysis, I created the automatic color marks, as you can see, where the yellow means that the results is pretty bad and there's lots of space for improvement. Orange, which means that it's below average, but it's not tragic. Light blue, which means that it's okay, it's good, it's above average. And the dark blue means that the results here are extremely good, and for sure there's no room for improvement. And the higher stakes you play, it might even be a variance, or if not, you're definitely a role model in that area. So yep, as you can see, when we look at the results versus regs, heads up small blind slightly above average, heads up big blind slightly below average, but nothing spectacular, right? So only big blind versus button to be improved, definitely results below the expected. When you click on on each of the stats, you can see some reference points. these are general reference points because obviously everything changes, like the game is pretty dynamic, depends on the sample size and the opponent and so on. You know, there's like both results and frequencies could differ. So it's more of a 80% confidence area. But obviously, if you're crushing something or you're pretty bad or you're just running pretty bad, this might be affected. And like in that example, as you can see, this Leakfinder has only 2,400 tournaments, which of 1,700 versus regs. And if you played a few spin and go games, you might know that big blind versus button spots are not so common. So number of hands has to be pretty limited here. So I wouldn't really trust into that number. I would definitely wait for a bigger sample size. However, we can move to the bottom and basically see the big blind versus button stats here. Maybe we can spot something with the stats. And here we go with the frequencies that are versus regs. We can spot that definitely there is the shining red tendency, which means that it's definitely too aggressive. Probing turn with air cards, also with draws slightly red, but in my opinion, in both cases, that's definitely way above way too aggressive versus button than we should play versus regs. As regs usually play 30, 35. VPIP, even most of the regs play on the button tighter than even their GTO recommendation. And it's extremely hard to find someone who's playing wider than GTO. So there's a great asymmetric when it comes to putting pressure on button whose range is pretty strong. Therefore, I don't really recommend putting pressure on button. It's full of Broadway's ace highs, and people don't really overfold these unless we want to fire two big bullets and we expect our opponent not to slow play. The turn is an undercard, or I mean, these situations. The problem with putting pressure in prob and bad situations is that these are high variance and high risk spots. While we have lots of hands to go, we might have a fish on the right, and obviously heads up we will gain more edge. So I would definitely skip on these moves unless our opponent plays high VPIP, and definitely he has a tendency to fold versus bets unless his delay is and also his delay is low, right? Because if I mean it's high, because if someone's delay is low, even though we make money with the probe, we can easily move our bluff to the river, which will be less variance, less expensive, and yeah, simply same results with lower investment. So yeah, that's what we are looking for. So definitely that's the first thing to improve, and not only a variance, but for sure this tendency is connected with these weaker results versus regs, big blind versus button. But for sure, besides that, we see that there are some places, there are some rooms where the results might not be the best, but definitely, I mean, might not be the best. They are slightly below average. They are not tragic, right? And in the first place, we should focus on areas where we can improve the most with the least effort, right? The cheap money. So moving from reg to fish strategy, and here we can see that heads up results drops a lot. They are not so great. We can see that the sample size versus fish is 1,700 tournaments. So for sure it's affected with variance, but heads up, there are usually enough hands to tell rather correct results. But yeah, it's always worth checking where does the money come from. I mean, where does the money vanish? So if we move below, we could see more detailed stats, but in that case, there is a demanded limit of the demanded sample size to see results in details. In that case, for a particular opportunity, or hand strength, or stack size, or pre-flop range, right? So basically, if here we have only 1,700, we will not see it. So it's better not to see results and then see wrong results, right? So to avoid the information noise, these stuff are not shown. However, there are lots of colors, and we can spot lots of tendencies that for sure affect the heads-up results. Here we play versus fish. So let's see where, in general, we can improve the game. So these slight colors, they are not so important. They show some tendencies, but unless there are plenty of them and they are in one color, we shouldn't care about them. So we can turn off these small mistakes to also have less numbers, to be able to focus more on the reality. We can see that definitely this player has aggressive tendencies, especially to semi-bluff, pretty high second bottle withdrawals. We see almost 100% float withdrawals, 40% raise withdrawals. So definitely this player loves to put pressure, and both with draws, as for example on the flop or turn, but then also the river bluffing frequency, as for bet check bets or delays, as on third boards, it's pretty high. So I think this might be a problem, that maybe this player is oriented too much into looking at his hand strength instead of real situations and how good they are actually to perform an aggressive move. Because still, a draw is just slightly better air card, and it means that if there's a guy who who's playing wide range, we can semi-bluff him, we can make a bluff with slightly added equity. But if someone is more of a tight, he's definitely not aggressive, maybe he's even balanced, but in a situation where people don't find themselves over bluffing or over aggressive, therefore like being aggressive with draws in the best case scenario will perform as break even. I think against many players, this strategy of being aggressive with semi bluffs, it might not be the best. So I think that would be my first guess. So this player could double check on his aggression if he puts enough attention on the player that he's playing against, not only on his hand strength. What else? There are some little things like average size, bottle size, 65% of air cards. This actually shouldn't shine red. Dark red could be slight red, but not a big deal. With the turn, bluff size should be somewhere between 50 and 75. So this average between 60 and 70 sounds fine to me. Folding air cards, 75. So this player doesn't like to fold versus c-bet, and that's fine as long as you do it versus, as he does it, versus an opponent with high VPAP, high c-bet, and so on. If you overdo it without looking at stats, this might cause basically building pot versus someone with tighter range. So I think this might be the general problem of this player, that he's aggressive, he's putting lots of pressure, but maybe he's not adjusting quickly enough against the more tight or passive players. Right, we can see similar tendency when it comes to folding draws and medium pair versus battle. These stats are again pretty low. So yeah, sounds like he's just maybe expecting someone to battle and bluff like he does. But we know that population of recreational players, they don't really over bluff that frequently with second battle. So as long as we have some, as the sizing is not too high, or we have a pair with draw or draw with some sort of a showdown value like ace high, king high, or overcard, we can still agree on calling, but the numbers seem too low. So this player is too sticky, so he's too aggressive, and he expects others to be very aggressive. With air cards, as you can see, probing turn with air cards pretty high as well. Although with probing, it's not that bad, because usually when someone checks the flop, we have way bigger room for exploiting someone here than when we face a second battle. However, there's another thing that's interesting. As you can see, probing turn with medium pair, bottom pair, and top pair shines green, and the other place where we can see the green color is actually the second battle of the top pair. So sounds like this player likes slow playing, both in position with second battle opportunity and out of position with probing opportunity. And if we look forward to the top pair table, top pair on the river, we see a clear tendency that overall betting out of position frequency 51, betting on pairs 60, one bet, so these are bet check bets, delay bets 71, probe river 53. This player has extreme tendency to slow play, and as long as we play against regular players, it makes perfect sense, because regs will more often bluff, regs will use bigger sizings, regs will thin value bet, so we can then check raise, and basically protecting ourselves, protecting our range, whether with a turn check in position or skip probe or skip river probe. It makes sense. That's very good. Though versus non-reg guys, versus recreational players, that's definitely an overplay. And most of the time, even versus most of regs, it's not that necessary. That's a great adjust for sure if you see that someone likes to bet, if someone plays strategy similar to this player in position. And this sounds like this player plays his heads up big blind like he expects someone to play small blind, heads up small blind like he plays. That's why you can spot so many slow plays, because this player is very aggressive with air cards and in position. Therefore, he wants to slow play a lot out of position, his top range. So it's very visible that this player, instead of adjusting towards the opponents, he rather adjusts towards his own game plan. I mean, I think that's normal, because we build some sort of expectation how players work, how the reality works, and so on. But here, the next step for this player is to realize that players are not so aggressive. Most of the time, they are not value betting enough. So the first step is to value bet, the top range, and start slow playing only when we spot tendencies that are so aggressive, like his heads up small blind tendencies. And for sure, this is also connected to the. This belief makes this player call a lot versus aggression, which are especially the most high variance and risky situations when we face a big bet, 51% plus, or three battles. So fold versus 51% sizing, 47 with medium pair, extremely little. Fold versus triple barrel, 33. That's probably small sample size, but still tells us that this player believes that other players are very aggressive heads up small blind, and that's not true. And this is a core belief that I think that this player should change. That would affect his game, like overall game. And as you can see, it's not about particular league. It's about where the perception of the game shifts from the reality, so it affects slow playing out of position, top range, and calling too many medium pairs versus river aggression. And as I said, as long as after we play some hands, for sure we can adjust in that way to call more versus bets or slow play more. We shouldn't do it readless. We shouldn't do it against most of players. Yes, there are some aggressive guys, but not so frequently to have statistics like that. That's definitely, especially that, you know, most of the regs got eliminated from here, right? We have 1,700 tournaments versus regs. So, right, so most likely there were 600 tournaments versus 2 regs, 600 tournaments versus 2 fish, and the rest 1,700 were versus 1 reg, 1 fish. So there are plenty of regs already selected here. So so here, if we look only at stats versus fish, these most of the sample size had to be played against someone against whom we don't really have a sample size, like less than 50 hands probably. So playing as a default that style will not make money, and that's why, I mean, will not make money. It makes money, but it makes little money, right? The results can be easily shifted a lot by at least 2 chips per hand heads up small blind and 1 chip heads up big blind. So these are great improvements. And whenever we play against recreational players, we want to use these situations. We want to maximize the value, because we won't do it versus regs, where the results are more or less on zero. But versus fish, we definitely have lots of room to do it. We can also spot at the beginning general tendency call versus overbet, topper or worse, right? So just the topper versus overbet, shining red 25. Though versus regs, that's fine. That should be done more frequently. Versus fish, that's a maybe not suicide, but it's not profitable. You can easily check it in PT4 or whatever tracker how frequently population overbets with bluffs, and it was very rarely in very rare situations. I mean, time frame database stakes or whatever, it was very rarely crossing 30%. So, you know, to call the pot size bet, we need to win 33% of the time. While if it's below 30, it means that it's slight loss, but the pot is so big that it's a significant loss that's repeated, especially with such a frequency. So this is the problem, calling too frequently bets with top pairs, with medium pairs, slow playing too much, and definitely over bluffing. I think these paired boards and paired boards on the river general when it comes to structure, but I think the problem is that our opponent might be playing too much of his hand strength and too little of his opponent. So the main goal would be to spot, hey, is my opponent actually a guy who called wide range on the flop? Is he a guy against whom I can semi-bluff second barrel light? Or maybe he's just a random guy who already overfolds pre-flop and on the flop, and there is definitely no room with the flop, with the second barrel on the turn, or with the bet check bet. Not mentioning triple barreling or bet check betting on paired board, which is very problematic. Yep, I think that's a general review. And yeah, and I think let's start with that, because obviously there are plenty of details, plenty of stuff to, as always, to play a bit better. But let's start with things that improve the game the most, and then step by step, not to overwhelm ourselves with details. Let's focus on priorities. Okay, I hope that you liked the review. I hope that you like the Leakfinder, and yeah, see you in next episodes.